Hey everyone, welcome back to Why We Heal. I'm your host, Zuyapa, and today I've got another very special guest, Adam Elenbass of Nightlight Astrology, who, as you can see from Nightlight Astrology, is I would say, a master of astrology. I don't know if he would call himself a master, but that's okay. As you know, with this show, we are breaking down all things healing and helping to get you closer to what you need so that you can take the next step in your life, in your healing, and your evolution. Astrology may not be what you'd expect, but everything matters. And this is something that I personally have used in my own life to understand myself, to understand life, and most importantly, to understand other people. It helped me with compassion, understanding, and to understand the entire cosmos and framework of how everything comes together, which ultimately helps understand life. So I'm very excited to have Adam and to hear and share with you all the things and the wealth of knowledge that he's accumulated over these years. And Hi, Adam.
Hey, thanks for having me, Zuyapa. It's really nice to be with you. And yeah, I've known you for a long time, and we sort of follow each other on social media and like keep in touch. And it's just I love what you're doing with this show, and yeah, really glad to be sitting here chatting with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. Yeah, I love, of course, your work on, if you guys haven't seen, if you don't know Adam yet, he does amazing videos on YouTube. Aside from his courses and everything else that he offers, I mean, a storehouse of content and classes and offerings, and they are all very amazing. So I'm excited to have you. So we're going to get started.
Yeah,
And first question is, what, in your perspective, is healing?
yeah, yeah. It's a great question. So I think there's different ways of looking at healing. So I certainly don't think that my way is the only way of looking at or understanding it. But I tend to think of healing as an activity, um, rather than like a goal. So,
Mm,
for example, I think there's growing up in the Christian church as a preacher's kid, and the idea that you're born a sinner. There's original sin, that something originally got messed up and you have to heal or fix that and seek salvation and stuff like that. There's a there's a whole paradigm out there in the realm of let's like healing and health and self-care that sort of subtly adopts that idea that we're broken and we need fixing. And so I don't personally bring that paradigm into the way that I look at healing, um, which is not to discredit it either. It's just not particularly, it's not the lens that I really bring to it. Instead, I look at healing as there's always a space for healing. It's like any time that you choose, I'm going to go do some healing. I feel like just because you choose to do that doesn't mean that there's something always broken that needs fixing or that you're trying to perfect yourself. To me, healing is a little bit like saying I just need to go down to the river, and I need to wade in the river, or I need to go to the well and dip my bucket in. It's an activity that feeds the soul, and it's a feeling that you get of reconnecting to something. And you know but I really like no longer think of it as something that is like a to-do list, like, well, if I don't go heal, then I'm broken. I think about it more like, what do I want to do today? Well, I think I'll do some healing because it sounds like a fun thing to do. you know and certainly there are things that are broken and need fixing, or traumas that need healing that can hold us back, and stuff like that. But I sort of am like trying to lately, I feel like I've been reconfiguring my relationship with healing so that it's not like, well, there's something wrong with you, so you need to heal. But it's more like, let's go down to the well or the river.
yeah, I love that so much. And sidebar, one of the things that I also really love about you is that I always find quotables. So like healing is an activity that feeds the soul. Yes, yes, exactly. I mean, number one, I just started a nonprofit here in the South called Healing Well. So I really resonate with that. And also,
Nice.
there's a whole thing, and part of the show is, taking away from like, I have to go heal because something's broken or needs fixing, to take it to be more proactive about it, and understand that it's a resource and a tool that can actually just help you live your life better and explore
Right.
yourself and be, something engaging and fun. So I really, really, really love that distinction. And I'm curious, was there a point that took you from, going from healing to like needing to fix something and being able to look at it yourself more proactively?
Um, I would say, you know, sort of like well, I think back to when I was a kid. I went to youth group, like church youth groups, and they had quite frequently they'd have like praise and worship services that were pretty evangelical, and they do like an altar call, like come up and get right with
Yeah.
Jesus, like
Yeah.
and and I liked doing that because of how it felt. And but at one point I'd sort of like start questioning, like, wait a sec, I've gotten saved already, right? So I don't have to go back up, but I like going up. I, I like, like, I just like it because it feels good, and I think that's sort of like maybe one of the earliest experiences I had of just realizing that there are things that you do that are that you need to do, like hygiene for the soul, like taking a shower, but and we could call this form of hygiene healing. And that, yeah, like I said, like it's not tantamount to like getting saved because you're lost, but it's still very important to do, just like brushing your teeth is important to do. And then I think probably the time where it became more acute or like critical, where it was like, well, I have something really serious that I need to be healed from, like a cavity, like you got to go see the dentist, or would be, or like an infection or something, would be in my early 20s. I was prescribed some pain medications after a surgery, and I ended up getting addicted to them.
Mm.
And I worked in a restaurant, and for anybody out there who's been a server before, it's like you hang out with the people that you work with. You'll often drink, and
Yeah. The
like
whole
drugs are
culture.
available. So yeah, it's a culture, right? And so I just got looped into opiate use through this sequence of events. And the first, I think, serious healing that I sought was to get clean and sober in my early 20s. And that ended up um, taking me down the road of exploring with plant medicines and psychedelic medicines and stuff like that. And eventually like yoga and other things too. But um, that was more acute. That was more like, I need some help here, so
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
different, I guess there's different levels. There's like the hygiene level, and then there's like the acute trauma level. And, yeah. What about you? When was there like a moment for you?
That of which part?
Well, I guess just like, was there a moment where like the healing path sort of was like, oh, this is what I want to, it's just like opening up in my life or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. hmm Um, it was kind of around the time that I met you, actually, because astrology was the first thing that I explored in my early 20s when I was still living in New Orleans. And then I had moved to New York when I met you, and I was modeling at the time. And I had gotten sick. I mean, honestly, you guys, sorry, TMI, but this is very much life. I had gotten really, really constipated. But I didn't know that that's what it was. Seriously, it happened.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
really didn't
good.
know that's what it was. I knew that I was really busy because I was bartending, and I was also modeling and like all this stuff. I was in my 20s. So, for women, your body hasn't changed yet. I was eating burgers, ice cream, like just every day, eating really poorly and just too busy really to take care of myself. And so my hair started falling out. I was having really bad headaches. I knew that I wasn't well, but I was just pushing. And then one day, or a girl that I worked with was like, "You got to see my mom." And her mom turned out to be a nutritionist and a social worker, I believe. She's a social worker. And so I started seeing her. And in that process of her helping me clean out my body, I experienced Reiki for the first time. But then
Hmm.
I also was actually able to, I just started running energy through my hands without trying. And so that really awakened that for me. And then through that process, I got curious and wanted to explore more. And then even that, I realized how numb that I was and like how my heart was really shut down and how I've been creating all these situations in my life that represented that, not having to be vulnerable. But then also my life wasn't really flowing, you know?
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think then I came to a point where I started asking people around me, like, oh, no, I'm sorry, back up. So as I was exploring this, I started changing a little. I started changing, and people would start asking me for help, like, how can you help me be more peaceful? Can you help me, feel at ease? And then I started asking people around me, my friends, I think my partner at the time, and they were all like, yeah, it's a no brainer. Like, this is who you are. Yes, you should pursue this. Yes, you should do this. And so, really having that reflection back from people that I really knew me and I cared about, that really was kind of it. I started just exploring more, and now here we are.
That's really cool. So that was, I mean, I think I met you in like 2010 or 11.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was around 2011, and I remember it was because I don't know how I found you originally, but I came to your workshop. It was
That's
about
right. Yeah, totally.
yeah, yeah. I came to your workshop, and we were doing north and south nodes, I think, and
Right.
it showed me something in my chart that was like my connection with my family's ancestral healing,
Mhm.
and I knew that over, like I knew that in myself. I knew that. Like, I knew that I was the first one who went away because I was going to get something new to come and bring it back, which now I'm back home and it's manifesting. And that was really, it was really profound for me to have that experience in your program. And so I'm still having those experiences in your teachings, and everything. So that's also why you're here. But yeah, so I think that was a part of it. I had to go through the healing, that whole process first to be able to start flowing that through my
Hmm.
lineage.
That's super cool. Yeah.
You changed my life, Adam. No pressure to do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because like that, all of the people that somehow I mean, I was so new to it, and the people that showed up and took an interest in it, and especially that first year or two, the people that were like my very first clients, students, workshop attendees, that, I mean, like, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for people showing up and letting me give it a whirl in those first couple of years. So yeah, I'm just like, I was just a kid living in New York trying to do
Were
astrology.
you
So
living
it's
in New York
really, yeah,
then?
it's, what's that?
Were you living in New York then? I thought you were in DC.
Yeah, so I was in New York City, and from like 2008 to 2011,
Okay.
and then at the very end of 2011, I met my wife and moved to DC to be with her. We started dating at the time, so I wasn't there. I would have been there just a little bit when I met you, and
Hmm.
then I moved pretty shortly after that. But I had been in New York City, and always, I think New York is just like conducive to people like, well, just give it a whirl and try
Yeah.
acting or try, like
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. You just throw it out there and see who shows up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard other stories like this of how astrology is, um, or even maybe something specific about someone's reading, that really helped them to shift something in their own self perception of their life?
It can happen in so many different ways. Astrology is, most of the time, astrology, if people don't know anything about astrology, they have a lot of ideas and, frankly, probably some misconceptions,
Yeah.
because it's
Let's
just
throw
easy
those
to,
out really quick. Let's throw those
the
out really quick.
misconceptions.
Yes. So, like, about horoscopes and all the things that people think and turn them away, because this is not what we're talking about. We are not talking
Right.
about
Yeah,
newspaper
exactly. Like,
horoscopes and all those things.
yeah, I mean, so people will think that astrology is nothing more than newspaper horoscopes, which is like a very recent development in the history of astrology and a very poor representation of what astrology actually is. Astrology is much more like it's as complex a system as, like, say, Ayurveda or acupuncture,
Hmm.
right? So it's a science, and it's a healing science that's thousands of years old, that was used by Arabs and Muslims and Jews and Hindus and Christians and all sorts of different religious groups, and as thought of as a viable spiritual science, a study of destiny, and in India it'd be the study of karma, and so forth. And really, what you're doing when you look at a birth chart is looking at so much more than your sun sign. For example, a misconception that people have is that, oh, like, I'm a Leo or I'm a Cancer or whatever the case might be, and it's like, well, you're in, for thousands of years, people would never think of themselves as a sign.
Mm.
It'd be sort of like, be the equivalent of thinking of yourself as a tarot card, you know, like, well, okay, yeah, like maybe I'm a bit of the magician or something, you know, but you wouldn't. So it's very new to think of ourselves in terms of like a kind of identification with a sign in astrology. That's really new too.
That's how kind of people now are like, I'm a mom, or I'm a
Right.
social worker, or I'm a this thing, when you are so much more than that.
Hmm.
You're
Yeah,
so
the
much
chart's really like such a multi-dimensional picture of who we are psychologically, and also it's doing more than describing who we are psychologically. It's also describing the kinds of life patterns that we'll meet in different areas of life, from health to family to father and mother to siblings to work to lovers, you know, all sorts of things. And reading those patterns and helping people recognize them and learn from them, interact with them, maybe shift or change some of those patterns, heal some of them. That's really what the study is about.
Yeah, which is also very different from the specificity that I see some astrologers using. You know, like this, the moon is in Leo, you will experience X, Y, Z, which, you know, I mean, some people might, but it also gets so binary that it's missing the grandeur and the mystery of that we are reflections, right? And the influence of these planetary energies, which is the approach that you take, which, you know, I think helps people to it's expansive, you know, and it's consciousness raising, and you know, there's so much potential. And
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's there's a lot of what people end up seeing on social media is going to be you know, like the brand of astrology that most people are used to seeing on social media will be sort of like a person who is looking at a few basic factors and taking a list of, say, symbolic adjectives that belong to Leo or the moon or whatever, and they're just kind of blending them together in a soup and then putting it out there. And you know, sometimes it hits, sometimes there's a real resonance with it, you know, but most of the time, if you're going to get into astrology, you know, at a deeper level and a level that's as sophisticated as other spiritual sciences like energy healing modalities or acupuncture or ayurveda or whatever, you know, it takes a long time to study and to learn how to be precise. You know, and most of the other thing that's really hard is that it's only very recently that astrology has been um, used as a way of talking about something that it's assumed that everyone is experiencing.
mm,
So, you know, like someone, for example, might draw a tarot card for the day and say, like, okay, today we're all working with this tarot card. Well, if you're tuning into that channel as a source of guidance, then you're aligning yourself with that symbol consciously. But you know very well that that's what you're doing. You don't presume that somehow for everyone everywhere that card is like active just because one person
mm,
randomly drew it. Well, in astrology, the problem is that astrology was traditionally a form of divination, and yet people will project it out there like it's as tangible and objective as like weather.
mm,
And it's not. It who you're listening to, who is speaking about the astrology is essentially no different from someone pulling a card. And it's your entrainment to the astrologers that you like and to the way they work with the symbols that will help you connect with those symbols and see them and work with them in your life. But people will treat it almost like it's, well, the astrology is causing things. But for ancient astrologers, that would be like saying that just because the clock shows that it's noon means that the clock is causing it to be noon, right? And
mm,
so that subtle distinction is really important because a lot of the people will also get turned off from astrology because they'll think, well, I don't really believe that the planets are causing everything to happen. And it's like, well, good news, because for, you know, like 2,500 years, no astrologer believed that either. You know, it's like that there's some early astrologers that tried to start presenting the idea that maybe the planets were causing things to happen. But by and large, the history of astrology is a history of looking at the circular movements and patterns of the planets as a kind of heavenly writing that is symbolic in nature and that can reflect things that are happening, but the way those things are happening and how those things are happening and why they're happening are deeply mysterious.
Hmm. I'm feeling, I'm leaning into that mystery, kind of going back into our divinity. And when we look at astrology as being something finite and specific, it's taking our divinity out of it. It's taking free will and um, the way that we have the option to uh, live our lives based on the influences, or to influence our lives. Does that make sense the way I said it?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. Like to speaking to the mystery point, one of the things that one of my favorite authors said, there was this Roman author named Manilius who was a poet, and he wrote an astrological textbook, but it was in poetry. It was like poetic verse, which was a popular way of trying to convey the deeper spiritual meaning of the science, would be to teach you the rules, but teach you the rules in poetry,
With
because
God.
poetry can convey these deeper meanings, which is really pretty cool. I mean, imagine if we had textbooks today that were written in poetry; it'd be pretty interesting.
I would read
Um,
them. I would actually read them.
yeah, right. So, in one of the things that he said in the opening um, pages of his text, which was called the Astronomica, was he said that the goal of this science is to bring us into the heart of the sky, and so. Um, that's a really enigmatic statement. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's really enigmatic, because what he really is talking about is a popular sentiment among early mystical astrologers, was that by studying the movements of the planets and seeing their symbolism reflected in your life, that you start to feel like you are at one with the cosmos, and something about that enhances your life and your happiness, even though it remains a deep mystery that you can't get to the bottom of. But you start feeling like you're in alignment with something, or like you're a part of something, and that brings you into the heart of the sky, and that the result is that you feel a kind of joy, even if you end up having a good day or a bad day. It wouldn't really matter, because if you can see the events reflected in the symbolism of the sky, then there's an appreciation for all manner of experiences that kind of transcends the tendencies that we have to get attached to, like, well, this is a good thing and this is a bad thing, and all of that.
Hmm. Yeah, this really speaks a lot to what I'm doing with my work, in training in the mysteries, which also was something that you called on in my astrology once. Um, and, helping people with healing and stepping onto the path of initiation and their own progression, through the mysteries is the same thing. It's about, helping people to recognize who they are in relation to the cosmos, in relation to God, in relation to divinity and the light. And in that, you can connect with the heart of everything. And it does bring about that joy. And you go further in your life by um, knowing those qualities of yourself and how you relate, right? Which then transcends and, expands your consciousness and the way you perceive and experience your life, even with more empowerment, because you then know really the mystery of who you are, the mystery of the cosmos, the mystery of everything, right? As it
Yeah.
relates to you, not just a star in the sky or a
Mm-hmm.
teaching in a
Yeah.
book. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so
Absolutely.
much what
Yeah.
we're
It's
missing.
mhm. Yeah. It's like the as someone who like grew up in religious community and gone through a lot of different religious communities in my life, that's been a real theme, almost like trying to figure out, you know okay, this didn't work from my childhood, so what's the thing
Hmm.
to replace it, like, kind of perpetually. And I feel like more and more it's been like, oh, the path home is really into the temple of your own heart, and
Hmm.
that's the place where, if, in my opinion now, and I don't want to sound too dramatic, but it's like, if any religious group or
Hope you're fine.
community or teachings aren't kind of leading you there, then where are they taking us, really? So
That's
that's kind
right.
of where I stand now.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's also, that concept of, we have everything within us. Yes, we do. And also, just like you go to school or anything else, you need the guidance to find it,
Hmm.
the tools to awaken it, to activate it. And ultimately, I totally agree with you. It's If you're not being led back into yourself, then where are you going? How do you
Yeah.
ever know who you really are?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And I feel like there's like a kind of like a horizontal plane and a vertical plane. Lots of mystics have talked about this before, and I see the horizontal plane as like kind of what my work has been lately. The vertical plane, let's say, is like connecting to, in India they might call it like the eternal dharma, like these spiritual teachings or teachers or texts or practices or whatever that kind of keep you pointed toward the North Star spiritually. It's like they're taking you along. Um, and I feel like that was like very well developed, even sort of overdeveloped in my life. And I think a lot of that had to do with like my religious upbringing. Um, and it's important to have that like awake and active somehow. But the horizontal plane is really the one that I feel like I've been working on, which would be more like, how do I really embrace a life that I'm living? The things that I love
Mm.
or like, and the people and the relationships and the body that I'm in, and like humor and everyday life, and not try to transcend that, but make sure that I'm really living a life that I'm here to live. And one of the things that I think, if you go too far in the direction of the vertical, the tendency is going to try to fly above the life that you're here to live. Whereas if you go too
Yeah.
far in the horizontal, of course, you'll get so entrenched within the life that you're living that you'll lose that kind of eternal perspective. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said a million times, but I feel like for me, it's really been the healing. If I would go back to that word we started off with, the healing has really been in the direction of like, okay, at this stage of my life, like I'm a dad, I've got two girls. I need to like do lots of very, very human, earthy, live this life kind of stuff right now. Own a business, like pay bills. I got a mortgage, like, and I've got, I don't know, like, I've got to develop my hobbies and interests and friendships and like make sure that I'm not just trying to fly above all those things, because I think that those things become the most precious places within which to discover these eternal realizations, or to find that mystery.
Yeah, don't you that I find that so interesting because that's also, in my view, the essence of the astrology, right? Like how do we bring the cosmos into life? How do we bring light and spirit into life? Because I think on a previous one I was saying how, like, to me, spirit animates life. Like, it's not so much. I use this analogy as well a lot, like the horizontal and the vertical, like horizontal kind of being changing, and the vertical being, or not a vertical, but kind of like a slope being progression. So how do we let the slope be, because we're bringing in the light and it's elevating us, but we're still anchored in the physical, and like just making life more rich and full.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
I know it's kind of
think,
open-ended.
yeah, no, I think that just the, like the task of marrying those things together. One of the things that I mentioned this to a friend the other day, because we were talking about like, it's challenging, and I was like, kind of like surprised myself with this. I was like, yeah, but I guess if that's the challenge that we have a challenge in front of us that's like 20 times better than a lot of challenges that a lot of people end up having. Not to
Yeah.
like just walk around comparing myself to anyone else, but it's like, well, what a fortunate challenge to have. You know what I mean? Like, to because as long as you have the awareness that your life matters, but there's also the spiritual plane that matters, and you have to bring them together, and it's challenging. It's like, well, what a beautiful spiritual inheritance to live a life where that's your problem.
Mm, beautiful spiritual inheritance. See, that's another great one. Yeah, so you just have to animate life. Yeah, and I guess it's the same thing as what you're saying about too about taking healing from the broken to the exploratory aspect. It's just like, oh, how do I enjoy life more?
Yeah.
I mean, life changes, of course. It's a whole thing that you have to go through as a parent, and your own journey of changing your whole perspective. But I guess we can approach with curiosity.
This reminds me of something. So speaking of like, it's exploratory and it's something we can do because it's beautiful to do to heal or to participate in any kind of like healing journey or activities or whatever. Um, so I was in India a couple of years ago, visiting like an ashram, and I was, very much there, like in devotee mode, like prayer, meditation, learning Sanskrit, taking classes, like just like immersing myself in that way for a little bit. It wasn't very long, just a couple of weeks. Um, but when I was there, I sometimes find that, I'll just get into a kind of meta conversation with God or source or the universe, whatever word people are comfortable with. And so it was this funny moment where I was like, well, why should we pray? Like, or
Mm.
meditate, whatever. I think there's different words for the same thing. Well, why should we pray? Like, why do people pray? And the answer that I got from within, and I like to think that that's like the little nudge from God, but whatever, the answer that came up within was, because it's beautiful and enjoyable to pray.
Mm.
Like there doesn't, in other words, there doesn't need to be any higher reason, which is why that image, there was this movie a long time ago. I feel like it was probably when I was in high school, called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Did you ever see that movie?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right? It was kind of funny. It was like a Coen Brothers movie, and George Clooney was
yeah,
in it or whatever. But there's this scene, the soundtrack from that movie I really liked, and there's a scene where there were just all of these believers going down to the river to pray, and there was that I went down to the river to pray song. It's like an old gospel song, and
yeah,
um, and everyone's just going down to the river to just go in and immerse themselves in the water and to have this kind of prayerful communion slash baptism. And the message that I got was very similar to saying that there doesn't need to be, like, the fact that people do this is no different from the fact that birds fly. Like, our
mm,
human beings commune with the universe, because it's beautiful and enjoyable to do so. And one way of describing that is healing, of what that experience feels like. But it's an eternal presence and it's an eternal activity. It doesn't terminate in becoming perfect or better or fixed.
yeah. There's no end to the journey. It's just a continuous communion.
Yeah. I love, in that sense, I used to go when I was in DC. Um, my wife and I would go to, there's a Buddhist temple in Potomac. And we used to drive out there. I think it was Potomac, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was Potomac. We'd drive out there, and we'd just they have like a shrine where you can just do walking circle meditation around this shrine. And we just go out there and do that some afternoons. And I remember similar, like one day I was in the bookstore after doing that, and I said, "So what is the purpose?" I asked the woman who was like a monk, or I don't know. Yeah, I think they call them monks. So she was like in the bookstore, and she had her robes on and stuff. I said, "So what is the purpose of walking meditation?" Like, and I was asking it from a very practical standpoint, not considering like I'm talking to like a Zen monk here. Like, and I've just asked a pretty profound question, like, but I wasn't thinking about it like that. I was just like, like, why do people do that? And it was such a, I don't know, such a Luddite kind of, anyway. So she looked at me and she said, "Did you find it enjoyable?" And I said, yeah, I love doing it. And she goes, "Yeah, that's why." It's like same
Mm,
exact thing. And I think there's a great understanding of that in many traditions, but like for sure, I know that Zen Buddhists, there doesn't need to be an explanation necessarily, and it's really relieving, actually, isn't it? I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, because then it takes you, so the explanation gets you in your head, which takes you out of your heart. So then if your heart feels the joy from something, then you know the essence of it. I
Yes.
think that was even something I needed to remember right now.
Yeah, that was so well said. I really like the way you put that.
Mm, mm. You're gonna take a moment for that one. I hope you guys are
Yeah.
taking a moment too. That was a really good one. Feel it in your heart. Wow. Yeah, see, I'm thinking we're going to talk about astrology and we're talking about so much more, but I do think that's also the beauty of what you're doing. I have to go back to a little bit because there's so much richness in your work. And yeah, like, I don't know if it makes you uncomfortable because I feel like it does a little bit, but how you approach the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching and, the various aspects. I really appreciate the complexity and the richness of how I don't know, and I'm just going to sing your praises the whole time. But I think also that's like your personal journey is also about like never stopping, which is I think is also a great example for people. Because I know you have a huge following and people, it's like yes, I'm experiencing this. I'm not the ultimate, and also I'm also always still learning and evolving myself. You know, so healing whether you're trying to or not.
Yeah. There's Yeah, I love exploring. Well, and thank you. That means a lot to me. And yeah, I love exploring. Like one of the things that I do on my channel is I try to jump into sacred texts from different traditions and sort of draw parallels to why we do astrology. And I think the reason for that is that, I just want people who watch my channel, at least a portion of them, because some people just don't watch those episodes. It's like, oh, he's not talking about a transit, that might have an
Yeah.
impact on me. So like, I'm just not going to listen. But there's a good amount of people who do. And for those people, I think, the point is to sort of check in like, well, why am I here? Why am I consuming astrology content? And just that little reframe can help the way that it's kind of the equivalent of saying like, look, if you're going to go to a nice, like, I don't know, like a beautiful restaurant in Paris, slow down, take 4 or 5 hours to eat that meal, stretch it out, enjoy the conversation, make that glass of wine last 3 hours, whatever it is. And I think if you reframe astrology in terms of all of the different ancient philosophical traditions that held parallel beliefs, then you're going to ingest that content at a much deeper and more profound level. So that's why I do that, because I have to do that for myself as a way of making sure that creating content 5 days a week doesn't drive me insane.
Yeah, you create
It's
a lot of
it's
content.
like
I'm impressed.
yeah. It's like a 5 day a week show. So, that's the show must go on. And those texts are a big part of like how, yeah, there's always some creative way into whatever's on the table to talk about any week with the astrology. If I have looked at these nuggets of wisdom, so I'm glad other people like it. It does make me like, yeah. And then I guess to your other point, the piece about like, the healing continues and goes onward. Yeah, it's the other thing is I think it's very important because one of the things that happens in astrology, and I think this happens in a lot of, let's just call it like the healing arts, is that if you develop a following, it's very easy subtly for your ego to think you've arrived somewhere, and
Yeah.
the truth is that my best content comes usually from the things I don't see, the stuff that pops up in the unconscious, the surprises, the moments of learning and insight. It's like if you don't keep that part of you alive, you're actually crowding out the muse. And you're going to need that if you want to create content. So, or if you want to keep learning astrology and keep loving it, like, so sort of, you get a busy client schedule and you think, well, now I'm set. Well, yeah, but you're going to hate astrology in a few years unless you find a way of making
Right.
it continue to feed you in the same way that it did up until you got your steady client practice, and so I think a lot of these tools are really also just ways of making sure that content, client, students, classes for me stay really enjoyable. It's like, if I don't stay on this, for me, my energy meter goes down really quickly and I start really not liking what I'm doing.
Hmm. That's so interesting. It's so interesting that, from your perspective, it's a way for you to keep it interesting and to keep things going. Because whether it's conscious or subconscious, to me, what you're keeping yourself going with is giving, giving continuously, sharing continuously, like receiving and flowing continuously. And I think I definitely have always felt that that's a big part of what comes back to you. And so much is that you're continuously giving, like you, to me, my outside perspective, you haven't necessarily let that ego take over and let it be all consuming, where I'm only now going to do client work because I have all these clients and I'm going to whatever, become this great person. You still are deeply connected with giving.
Yeah, and I think to to offer you a compliment in return, what you're doing as a way of sharing with people as a healer yourself the things that you connect to stay healthy and well, that's super important. And I think that's the hidden secret of giving, is you have to be able to give. You have to make sure your cup is full, and so you have something to draw on. And for me, those things that I draw on would be like, I mean, I can mention a few of them, like my Jungian therapist. I see a Jungian therapist. I know it could be any kind of therapist. I really like Jungian work because it's very symbolic and it kind of fits with astrology. But seeing a therapist, for me, like, I go to Quaker services on Wednesday nights, which is just 60 minutes of silence. It's just people get together in
Yeah.
a room and they just sit there silently. I love it. It's so
Yeah.
awesome. So I love that silent, prayerful, just community time. Um, and then physical, like I see a personal trainer, and I'm like, to me, like, taking care of my body, getting sleep, stuff like that, and then making sure that I do things for myself that I love to do, like my hobbies and my interests and stuff like that. Because it's also true that, like, sometimes, and I found this was true a little earlier in my career, that giving is sometimes connected to, um, it's like a covert attempt that the ego has sometimes, at least mine, of trying to get. It's like, well, if I
Mhm.
give a lot, then people will think I'm so wonderful,
Yeah.
and and it's like, and you can get by a little bit that way, but then the secret that it's not working is that you start getting burnt out and resentful and tired, and, like, you start getting sick.
Right.
And I hit a few of those walls after we had kids, because then it was like, okay, I'm spread too thin, and some of this is a bit of a charade. Not that all of it is. It's not like black and white, but it's like, okay, well, part of this is about my own ego. And that
Yeah.
was at the point where I was like, okay, well, I have to fill my cup up better, because I want to give, and I don't want to give for the wrong reasons. I don't want it to be just an ego thing. But so that's been an adjustment. There's been, I think, the giving spirit it's had to mature over time and make sure that it's like, that there's a reciprocity coming in, so that I'm not draining myself or trying to secretly take by giving.
Right. So you're kind of balancing your masculine and your feminine. The masculine tends to give, definitely has the need to be admired, or validated for his efforts. And then the feminine, needs to fill her cup, to flow, to give, to be inspired by creativity. So, yeah, you're balancing your masculine and feminine.
That's a great way of putting it. I never thought about it like that, but it makes total sense to me. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that, a lot of that's come, I would say, from also just like observing my wife adapt to being a mom.
Mm,
She's been a great model for me in terms of like how to do some of that balancing, because I think the challenges that she's been faced with physically on the level of identity as like a working woman and as a mom, and and that's a lot that compared to even what I've been dealing with. So she's been a good model for me to figure out how to do some of this stuff too, I think.
mm. Well, we're grateful to Ashley.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. It's like there's a few sayings around our house, like and it's like such a cliche, but it's like, one of the things that I think is really true is that it's like, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Like,
Yeah.
it's like so true. It's like, because it's like, I would just say this, and I don't mean to perpetuate, stereotypes too much, but like, if
I don't care about those
if
things.
Ashley's in a balanced state, like it's easier for everyone and everything to be in a balanced state, because she's
Absolutely.
like I think the women can hold that place. Not that every woman needs to or anything. I'm not trying to be too stereotyped here, but especially like in family units, like a mom's balance is somehow holds everything together psychically in the family.
Absolutely.
And so I've learned that a lot of yeah, but that's true. There's like an inner family in me too, And so if I can,
Aren't you a Taurus as well?
yeah, Taurus
Yeah.
rising and Cancer sun, so. But
Oh,
the other saying that we
wow.
have around my house is that what, and I think of this as the inner feminine, not necessarily just a literal woman, but what a
Mhm.
woman waters grows. That's another phrase. That was, my wife's a gardener and an herbalist and stuff like that. And so I also think to myself that self-care, let's call it that yin component inside of me. It's like when I really take care of something, then it just like flourishes. Like my wife, she could take care. We have some tadpoles that we rescued that were like gonna die because of the cold, and she like rescued them and brought them in, and she's been like taking care of these tadpoles all winter. I had 2 days where I was responsible for them. I just about killed them, and I thought I was doing everything that she told me to do, And I'm just saying in general, like it's just there's a tenderness and a care that's so essential for things to actually grow and be successful. And again,
Mm,
it's like that's what I mean when I say that I think I've gotten a little bit better at giving, because I've learned how to care for myself a little bit better. It's like my wife really
mm,
models like how to care for things, and you can't just like superficially give, because if you superficially give, like if I watch Ashley do that, I can tell it's not coming from that same nurturing place. And she'll tell you, or at least she tells me, like, I'm getting empty. I need to fill my tank, because otherwise that special mama magic is not going to be there. And all of this to me is metaphorical. This is just the yin and yang within any of us, really. But yeah, that's
right.
that's the kind of way that I see it around here.
I love that. I really wanted to dive into the divine feminine, especially, but I know that we are at the end of our time, so maybe that'll be my a follow up thing. But
I'd love it. That'd be really
yeah,
fun.
I have to do it. 30 seconds. Okay, so
Let's do it.
beyond stereotypes, it is all the essence, right? Like the divine, the feminine is such. It's not just like a womb. It's not just an idea or the body. It's the essence of the energy that gives life.
Hmm.
So yes, and just like the masculine energy is the essence of what penetrates, what goes forward, what pushes, what is the fire, the active energy. And so yes, I think as a society we have lost the beauty and the potential and the power of being women and femininity and womanhood. And I really want us to reclaim it, because it's not about what men are doing and what women are doing and all the fights and the things that we don't understand each other. If we can understand the primal aspects, the core aspects of our energy, we can flow better and honor what it means, to hold a feminine space or to hold a masculine space, and where those two combine and definitely need each other. Because as we can
Yeah.
see, everything's gone to shit. So because we're
Mm.
fighting and we don't understand how we need and can use each other, in a very glorious, heart-centered, divine way.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, so
yeah,
nicely said. I really like that.
I try. Well, thank you so much. Is there any parting words you want to leave for the people?
Um, just that y'all are really fortunate to know Zuyapa and to have her wisdom and energy and creativity in your lives. And I'm really fortunate to be here and really happy to share a little bit about my path and astrology and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll get to do it again.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. This was really cool, unexpected. I hope you really enjoyed it and got something out of it. Again, please subscribe to the channel, whether you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, or any other platform. And stay tuned for all the amazing guests we have next. And please follow Adam, Nightlight Astrology. You can find him anywhere with Nightlight Astrology. And yeah, expand your life through the glory of the cosmos. All right, till next time.